behave first. And when did uh, you started in 2004, right? Your own enterprise. I mean, your entrepreneur, moving from working for someone to becoming an entrepreneur. So my question is, why did you make that shift from working for an organization to running your own business?
Well, it's not uh, I mean, it's kind of not the most exciting answer, Dominic. Let me warn you. But I think the next move for me within the work environment I was in, the large bulge bracket investment banks, had to be outside India. I had done what I could in India. And I think there was a personal call to make in terms of whether I wanted to move out of India. And if you remember 2003, 4 were very exciting times in India. We were extremely optimistic at that point in time. Uh, and I think in many ways, 2003 to 2008 was probably the most amazing time for the Indian
Boom.
economy. Yeah.
Yeah. Before the crash.
Well, that one always follows, doesn't it? But no, I think, at that point in time, one felt that if one had worked from the early 90s and seen India through this, one wanted to actually continue in India. And really, for me, uh, that meant in some ways going on my own. And I got a great opportunity to set up a hedge fund, which was always some kind of a dream. So, and therefore, the entrepreneurship happened.
So in short, you hit a sort of a glass ceiling in India, is what you're saying. Or
Yeah,
not a glass ceiling. I mean, you hit the
but
ceiling.
yes, no, but you're absolutely right. A glass ceiling in what I was doing. So if I had to continue, I would have had to move within the banking world to something else, and this seemed
Okay.
like a better option.
So I have a follow-up question, but I'll first talk to Purvi and then come back to my follow-up question with you. So Purvi, interestingly, you have taken over your second generation. Like your mom started the business and you took over. So I'm going through a similar phase with my own son. I mean, my son has joined the business not with the aim of taking over, but he's joined the business. And working with him sometimes can get a little trying because you're never out of the business, because even at home you're still in the business. There are discussions, arguments. So did you have any similar hiccups when joining the business and then as you took over?
Um, well, I don't know about about your hiccups. You'll have to talk to my mum. But I'll tell you what your son might be going through. So when I started out, I started out wanting to actually be a journalist. And I still
To be
write
a
what I do.
journalist.
Yes.
Okay.
I worked for a newspaper for a very short while, and my myth about the pen being mightier than the sword was broken very quickly. So
Oh,
I was interning at Shilputsi before that at the firm, and I really
okay.
enjoyed it. But
Hmm.
because my both my parents were HR people, I didn't want to do it. You know, as a 21-year-old, you're telling yourself, I can never do anything that my parents want, right? So I decided to come back into HR because I realized that my ego and my rebellious phase aside, I actually enjoyed human resources and I enjoyed people. And so I came begging back and I got a job at the lowest level. And there were many levels between me and my mom. And therefore, there was absolutely no problem in terms of even because I was given a seat at the table much later on. And I started out at the bottom. In those days, there was no internet, there was no email. So I was made to write envelopes, and my productivity and efficiency was by how many addresses I could write in a day, and that's how it was measured. And I wanted to do HR, and I said this is not HR, but that's where it started off, and it taught me a lot. It also taught me to be observant and to watch what senior management was doing, which was my mother, my father, who also subsequently joined the firm, and taught me a lot as I waited in the wings. And I'm glad that I was not given, and I had seniors that I reported to between, and they worked with my parents, and it gave me an opportunity to learn I learned at the dining table from my mom and my dad, and I learned at the office from a lot of other people as well. And I think that was really good for me. Subsequently, yes, of course, over time, as you have more and more opinions on the business, there are clashes. But that's anywhere, I would imagine, whether it's a family business or not. So yeah, but that's the sum and
So
substance.
what you're saying is initially it was sort of a revulsion towards HR because your parents are there, and then you realize that you might as well put your ego, which was not the revulsion towards the business, it was your ego that I can't do what my parents are doing. Interesting, and
Absolutely.
nice of you to share that also. So Dave, my question which I had as a follow up to you was, see, when you're in banking, the beside I mean the take home is really healthy, okay, and I don't think that would be a reason for you to have left because you would probably be taking home, if I'm guessing right, a lot less than if you're working for someone. I'm just guessing here,
No, you're right.
maybe I'm
Absolutely.
here. And when you're working in banking, you would get a lot of perks which you are not paying out of pocket, like travel or getting to play with funds, where if you do lose, it's no skin off your teeth, nose. I mean, you don't lose anything. So this changeover, does it hurt you at sometimes? Like if I was there, there would be more funds to play with, there would be more leeway I would get.
No, I think not, but I'll explain that. See, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the salary was the money was great when I was in banking, and you ran a much bigger operation. In fact, a funny story is that when I started Lastaki, see, the hedge fund was a different world because as a hedge fund owner and manager, you still made a lot more money than a salary could pay you. Or at least the path to that was there. But when I started Lastaki, and we consciously moved away from doing the large deals we were doing to, working with smaller companies. One of the large investment banks sent a recruitment consultant to my office, who came in pretending to be someone who could be a business opportunity. And his question to me was that, look, this is the salary we'll pay you. How long will it take you to get Lastaki's revenue to be equal to this number? And, back in 2008, when the boom was, 2009, when, investment banking was still a very booming sector, that was a pretty big number. But I think, Dominic, high salaries can either bind you or liberate you. And I think, I keep saying that, apart from drugs and alcohol, a big corporate salary can be one of the most addictive things in the world, right? And for me, when I started Lastaki, I was turning 40, and I keep saying this was my 40th birthday gift to myself, that I said, look, at some point, I have to get liberated. I have to stop worrying about what I make every year or every month. Because I was in a lucky position where I didn't need to worry about it. And that's a very personal choice. When you say, look, that's not what I'm chasing at this point in time. And that's really why I came here. And I'm very happy with this. A lot of people who continue to do what they're doing are probably making a lot more money than I am, but that's their journey.
So, Purvi, I guess the same would apply to you, right? Because a large corporate HR salary would really be healthy. And then you have the perks, like I mentioned, for Dave also, the travel, the expense allowances. And to be very honest, I mean, when you have an expense account, it's not going directly from your pocket. And when you're giving an allowance to someone or you're giving a leeway to someone to do a certain project in a particular manner, there's a lot of freedom in terms of the revenue that you're putting out, which when you are taking a call on your own, in your own organization, if the call goes bad or if the expenses are more than the input, it's going to hurt. So how do you feel? I mean, are you better off being on your own and taking the stress, and probably even today sending out emails personally because you don't write out the envelopes anymore? But in a large company, you'd probably have a secretary and a couple of assistants, blah blah blah.
Yeah, so I still have an organization, and I still have help, and I think honestly, it's never been a question in my mind. Not even when I got offered a job. Just like Dave did, one of my clients one day said, why don't you join us? And same question that Dave was asked, saying, will you ever get Shilputsi to this level of revenue? And of course, the answer was no. But even at that point, while the salary, perks, everything sounded fantastic, and it was not a particularly good year revenue wise. So, it was otherwise would have been very attractive. And I remember speaking with Dave, and there have been often times where we've said, will we be better off working, or is it? And that remorse is about lasts for me for about 22 minutes, not more than 2 minutes at all. And I'm off saying no. I think I just enjoy what I do a lot more. So I don't know about. I can't speak for others, but I can definitely say that I've never had that remorse. I know what the trade-offs are, and very aware of them, and very happy to make those trade-offs. So I don't miss it at all. And I think yes, I could have financially perhaps been in a different spot, but I enjoy what I do, and I love the freedom that I get with it, and the creative freedom that I've had with my own career. If I was anywhere else, someone else would have charted my career path. I do that for companies and clients myself. I recruit very senior level HR people, and they do a great job. And I think somewhere I enjoy this side of the fence a lot. So it's never been an issue for me.
So, what are the trade-offs? I mean, both of you spoke. You specifically used the word trade-off, and I would use maybe sacrifice between working for an organization and being on your own.
So sorry, I was just going to come in. So Purvi, I'm going to interject here. But one of the things that I think is a huge positive, Dominic, which is very relevant to the topic of the day, the gig economy as well, in a way. See, if one of the things I always tell people is that today I don't spend a lot of my time doing big company administrative work. When you reach a senior level, and I used to feel this as I got more and more senior in the corporate world, that I spent a lot of my time doing internal committee meetings, and I'd do committee meetings and I'd do board meetings and I'd meet the same people and we'd present the same thing, and I couldn't figure out what we do, honestly. I mean, I wanted to, look, I felt for most of my, and this is a very personal thing, that look, there is a finite amount of time I have as a professional, and there's a certain amount of impact I want to make. And I'd rather spend my time with my clients, either with my people working, training them or whatever, or with my clients on their problems, right? I didn't find it very exciting or productive to be spending a lot of time in internal committees and stuff, which I understand is extremely essential if you're going to work in a large organization. That's the way large organizations manage themselves. And I think that is something that, I really enjoy about not being part of a large corporate setup. In Lastarki, a decision gets made between me and my partners on a phone call or a WhatsApp message in 2 minutes. And nobody makes slides, nobody makes presentation. You've actually worked with us, Dominic. You know how bad we are at doing that, which is why we needed your help. But I think that that's one of the trade-offs, if you ask me. And I find that
that's a positive, I suppose.
It is a very big positive. It is a very big positive.
So what you're saying is that you spend less time, bickering and more time working.
Not just
I am sorry
bickering.
to use the word bickering. I mean, I'm being a bit crass here, but if you're making the same presentation to the same people and you're going over the same points, because in corporate it tends to happen. I mean, a small decision, literally, like should we change the, the tea, what do you call that, dispenser, to getting a pantry, and there'll be a big discussion over that.
Correct. Or even, managing large teams, or, getting approvals to do things. And that's the only way a large corporate can manage itself. It needs to formalize. It can't be that you just call your boss and your boss says yes or no. Well, your boss can only say no. If they want to say yes, they have to take it up further.
But now they've, and I guess Purvi also, you'd be on this side of the fence, right? Because technically we are still going back to them and saying, and the person you report to, he can say no, but it's very rarely that they can say yes unless they go above. So aren't you back to the same square then?
You mean who? With the client?
With the client.
Look, clients are a problem whether you work in a large organization or small organization. It's not like, when we, funnily for me now, I mean,
got you. What you're saying is that at least internally we can move faster.
Much faster, right? I mean, if today my client tells me, look, I can't pay you X, can you work at Y? I mean, if as a HSBC, there was a process to kind of justify why we should work at Y. Here it's like, I max call my CFO and say, Reena, can we work at Y? That's all, right?
Correct. I think the business decisions you take, sorry, I was just reinforcing what they've said, is that the business decisions that you need to take, they're so much faster. So if I was working in a corporate, if I wanted to take on a new initiative, it would take multiple levels of selling that initiative to people, prepping for it. Today, I have started an initiative literally 2 weeks ago, and we've almost set up an entire practice around it and a revenue stream around it in 2 weeks. I managed to get a team, managed to put it all together, and we're going to be launching it very soon. Now, that in a corporate setup would take much longer, and that's the difference, I think, that at least we both enjoy.
You work with corporate, and Purvi, you also deal with them. Does it get frustrating at times? I'm sorry, I'm taking you back into your life when you were in, working with an organization. Would it get frustrating at times?
I think, look, the honest answer is, and you use the word trade-off, and that's correct. I mean, if you today still wanted to do the billion-dollar deals, you needed to be in a large investment bank. And the trade-off of that is that the bureaucracy of a large investment bank comes along with it, right? So you've got to reconcile to what you are trying to do.
What you want.
Yes, and there are positives and negatives to this. I think it's a question of, and that's why I said whether a large corporate salary liberates you, because by the time I became an entrepreneur, I had many years of a large corporate salary behind me. So I had a certain level of financial security. I don't have that romantic story of how I was down to my last $100 in my wallet as an entrepreneur at any point. No, seriously. And, I hope I don't have that moment later, but I haven't had it till now, But yeah, there are trade-offs, right? Because there are certain things that as a small company, you're not going to get a seat at many tables.
Okay, now coming to Purvi. Purvi, meaning taking what Dave said and the question I threw about frustration. You deal with a lot of companies from the HR perspective, advise them, etc. What is the one or couple of reasons, let's say, if you have one major reason or a couple of reasons why people leave organizations to join another organization? And a second question would be why they would leave an organization to start their own business, and do they do that?
So yes, of course, people leave jobs all the time, and I think it's got to do with multiple reasons. You can't generalize, and you can't say that there is any one overarching reason. Salary, for the most part, is a big reason why people move
Okay.
jobs. Growth and career paths is the second, and it could, depending on who you are, the order could change around that. Satisfaction, career satisfaction, being able to contribute. Sometimes you reach a glass ceiling, like Dave was mentioning, and you don't feel you're contributing enough to this organization. You move to another one where they might value your contribution. So there are multiple reasons why people would change jobs, and it's your personal choice and circumstance on. And I don't think people need to justify to the world, or there is any judgment around why you
Okay.
would move that job. Going from a job to entrepreneurship, sometimes that choice is forced. You don't find the right job, and or you don't like the kind of jobs you're getting, and you say that I'd rather become an entrepreneur and work for myself. A lot of people enjoy the freedom, or believe that there is a freedom involved with being an entrepreneur, and they would rather do that. So many people do that, and in today's world, being an entrepreneur and getting funding for it, and they would know more about this than I would. But I think it's more than, you asked me a question earlier, Dominic, why I didn't go on my own and why I joined the family business. Capital and VCs and funds and angel investors, those were not things that were happening in 1994, 95, and that today is available to anyone who wants to try and make a business work. So you could be 55, you could be doing this at 25, and you have the opportunity to actually make a business work. And I think that is what a lot of people get excited by in today's world, and move to becoming entrepreneurs.
What you just said has actually given me goosebumps, because what struck me from what you just said, I mean, it's sort of the elephant that was in the room and I didn't notice. There was a time when people could not buy homes because of lack of loans availability. Today everybody has access to loans and can buy a home. And what you have just said is that literally everybody has access to funds to start a company today, because there are so many companies. I mean, I literally cannot keep track of the names also. And you keep hearing about huge amount of funds being given either at the angel stage or a VC stage, and now they're even moving from VC to IPO pretty seamlessly. So that's a brilliant thing you pointed out. But one more question to you, because it struck me while you were speaking. From a long-term perspective, Dave, you could also pop in on this. From a long-term perspective, what is the reason you would advise someone not to leave a job? Let's say I'm leaving my organization, joining another organization. When you hear my reason, you'd hear it out and you'd say, okay, Dominic, from a long-term perspective, I 100% tell you, please don't do this. If you were talking to me, really frankly, openly, what is the one reason or two reasons you would say you should not be leaving this job for this reason?
I'd Hard to say, because Dominic is different from somebody else, and somebody else would be different. So it's very hard to say what I would
Okay.
advise in general. But I would advise people to look at their purpose and their personality. I think these are two things that drive the way you manage business, that drive the way you get into business, and you actually remain with it for the rest of your life.
No, I'm
Um,
not talking about entrepreneurship here. I'm just talking about leaving organization to join another organization.
I think
Have,
that's
have
very
you ever
personal.
advised anybody not to leave an organization? And
Uh,
if you could give us a case study, so and so, this is the background and this is why I said she or he should not leave.
Well,
sure.
sorry if I could just come in because
Yeah, that would be great, Dev.
no, I have a more recent example and therefore it's probably a little fresh in my mind. But see, I think sometimes in large organizations, you go through a period of maybe politics, strife, reorganization as they call it. And, suddenly path you're walking on seems strewn with all
Slippery.
kinds of obstacles. Yeah, debris, absolutely. and and I think leaving at that point, either out of frustration or fear, of what might happen is probably not a very good thing to do, especially if you're reasonably senior. Look, these are all parts of the whole path of
Game.
walking a a career path. Um, I think that unless you're really have no options, leaving a job for a negative reason is probably not a good idea. You probably want to wait, see that period through, or because sometimes these things in the beginning seem much larger problems than they are. They sort themselves out, or you go through a lean period and then things get better. And definitely leaving a job to start your own business for a reason like this is a terrible reason to start a business. Because once you start a business, it's a very hard decision to unwind.
Big commitment.
Big commitment. You'll have employees, you'll have investments that you make, you'll have all kinds of, you can't burn those bridges very easily. And I think you need to make that call extremely consciously.
So what I hear you saying is that if I am going through a period of frustration, that should not be the reason to leave. Like either my boss has changed, either some policy has changed. If there is what you see as a temporary hiccup, I should wait. Yeah, I should have the resilience to wait that out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Makes sense. That means you're not taking a decision based out of emotional turmoil.
Absolutely.
And thus jumping. And if you are moving from job to job, it's a lot safer than if you're moving from job to business. Then business, you need to be thinking properly and definitely not be moving out of frustration.
Correct.
Good.
right.
Okay, so now we've got some Q&A that have popped up and I will go to those. Also, if anybody would like to ask a question, you could raise your hand and Jervis will unmute you and you could speak up. The first comment I can see is it's in the Q&A box, but Purvi ma'am and Dev sir, you all both speak so well. So I think it's a veiled compliment to you all and a slap to me. Like you all speak well. Anyway, there's a question from Pushpa. Being an entrepreneur requires a certain kind of mindset and discipline. How can one decide whether one should become an entrepreneur or not? Any particular characteristics? So I'll give you a background because I know Pushpa Chatterjee. She is a IHM graduate based out of Bangalore. She's my batchmate. And she is also dabbling in entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. So she says it requires a certain mindset and discipline. How can one decide that, okay, I am made for entrepreneurship? So are there any characteristics you all feel that an entrepreneur requires?
There are many, Pushpa, that an entrepreneur requires, and some of them you don't have at the outset. It's a little bit like parenthood. You don't have everything when you start out, you just develop it as you go along. So being an entrepreneur...
I have to stop you here, Purvi. That was brilliant. What you're saying is you don't have to have all the skill set when you start off as an entrepreneur. You can learn it on the way. And I love this like being a parent.
The analogy, yeah.
That was beautiful. It hit the nail on the head. Carry on. Sorry.
So yes, so you will learn it as you go along. But I'm going to go back to the point I was making earlier with Dominic, that you've got to look at what your purpose is and you've got to look at what your personality can handle.
Yeah.
And what is your purpose? Why are you doing this? Like Dave said, if it's fear and frustration, maybe that's not a great reason to become an entrepreneur, because there are many more fears and frustrations waiting for you on the other side, as some of us on the panel can tell you. But if you want to do something different, or you want to do something where you feel that you are contributing directly, and if your personality can handle the ups and downs of entrepreneurship, and resilience is extremely important. After so many years of business, both Dave and I have days where things go terribly wrong, and they don't last the day, they last the week and the month. And you've got to be able to separate that and keep that in its box where it lies, and then say there is more to life than this. This is going to now change in some time, and you've got to keep looking forward. So that's one piece that I would advise, that make sure that you have that in you a little bit. If you're going to be breaking down at every time there is a failure, that's a tough part of entrepreneurship that you'll have to deal with. And purpose is to my mind, what is it that you really want to do? And I think if you figured out your purpose, then entrepreneurship is quite easy in some ways. Dave, I'll defer to you for some more.
No, actually, I think you've covered everything. I think fear and frustration are the good days of entrepreneurship. Panic and despondency is more like par for course. But not to get too negative on entrepreneurship. But I think that, look, you need a lot of emotional strength to be an entrepreneur. I come from a family which was never into entrepreneurship. My brother-in-law was the first entrepreneur. And I remember asking him if he had any, advice for me when I became an entrepreneur. And he said, look, it's a very lonely job, because on your first days, even your family will not understand what you're trying to do. And that is true, because, you often drag your family through this. And as I said, I was relatively lucky because, nobody was kind of wondering where the bills would get paid from by the time I became an entrepreneur. But that's not always the case. And a lot of my clients were first generation entrepreneurs. I can see that they've really dragged their families through 15, 20 years of sacrifice, and they could have had high paying jobs. I think it needs a lot of emotional strength to go through that period. And as Purvi said, the purpose. If you think that there is a larger goal your business is trying to achieve and that you are, I think that really is a very important motivating factor on the bad days. And that's why, being in business just to make more money is often not a great reason.
Yeah, because what you said before is you're probably making less money.
You're often making less money. There's a lot of risk that you take. There's a lot of risk and sacrifice your family makes, because, you often put back a lot of the money you make into the business. It's not easy for, your kids to understand why you don't have the fancy car standing outside your house. But look, those are just things that you have to be very, very clear on.
Okay, so we got one more question. Why should one work at a large MNC? I don't know where the person is coming from, as in why should a person? It's not like you've been advising them to work, but I suppose they're asking what are the benefits of working for a large MNC? I'm presuming that.
Well, maybe, I should take that having worked at MNCs and then not at MNCs. But I think the big thing is that, look, an MNC gives you a much bigger canvas in many ways, or it could give you a much bigger canvas. You could, if you're lucky and you're working in the right jobs at an MNC, you could be painting on a canvas that covers many markets, that gives you a global perspective. And, the first few years of my job, I was lucky enough to be speaking to some of the largest investors in the world on why they should invest in India versus, let's say, other countries. And, having that conversation as a 20-something-year-old, being able to have that conversation with large global funds, I think that was a fascinating experience. It taught me, many myths about, we have these myths about, oh, India is so great and Indians are so great. And then you realize that, that's not necessarily true. There are lots of other countries out there which are doing fabulous work. There are lots of other people out there who work very, very hard, so I think you get to see the world, you get to experience the world. That's a great reason to be in a multinational, really.
Okay, so the international exposure. Go ahead, Purvi.
No, so I just wanted to add for that, we hire for Indian companies and Indian groups as well as multinationals. And there was a time when there were some things that were very, very distinctly different from multinationals as versus Indian groups and Indian companies. Today, those lines are slightly more blurred. But I think, like Dave said, global exposure So learning at that level and at a global level is something that multinationals offer. Scale and systems is the other thing that a lot of multinationals offer. Indian groups also offer scale, but multinationals offer a little more scale than just that. And finally, culture. I think you get to learn. I think that is extremely important, because in shaping who you are as a leader and as a manager, it's very important to have worked across a few cultures. It's one thing to say that yes, India is a amalgam of many cultures, but when you work across Europe, you work across Australia, you work across the US, you realize, like they were saying, that there's so much more out there. And how do you lead in all these places? And how do you manage in all these places? So I think that's something that's very exciting in multinationals.
Okay, so there's two questions which are similar. One says, what advice would you give yourself at age 24? And the other one is, what advice would you give your younger self? First thing is, I have to tell you that luckily they're addressing this question to you, because I'm not yet reached 24.
Right.
So
To you,
what advice would you give your younger self?
Well, I think, one thing, Dominic, I know is that older people giving advice to younger people is fairly useless, because never take it. And this is true across generations. But I think definitely one is to not take yourself that seriously. That, what's happening to you at 24 is not really going to make or mar the rest of your life. I mean, there will be many, many more twists and turns. And therefore, just take things a lot less seriously than you do.
Okay. Take things less seriously.
Yeah.
Purvi.
Yeah, I never took things too seriously, as you can see. So I did, but and definitely not myself. But I did. I think one thing that I would tell my younger self is patience. I used to often wonder when I was younger, when will I meet that next milestone? What's going to happen next? I wanted to look into the future very quickly. And sometimes you make mistakes when you're doing that. You don't sort of hold yourself back and say, what do I really need to do this? So there were times that I was doing too many things at the same time, and maybe that wasn't a good thing to do, and that's really because I was impatient. So yes, patience is a big virtue, and again, like Dave said, a younger person listening to that is just going to roll his eyes or her eyes. But if you can take that advice, that piece of advice, I think patience, and you should tell your son as well, Dominic.
I'm hoping he's listening. I mean, I know he's on the line. I'm hoping he's listening. But I think Purvi and Dev, the benefit of having impatience at the younger stage is much better. I mean, imagine if you had a young person who was patient. I mean, it wouldn't be a young person, I think.
There's a very thin line, Dominic, between being impatient and being too impulsive. So, impatience and energy, and the energy of that impatience is a good thing till it's positive. It can tip over very quickly to the other side of being overly
Impetus.
impulsive. Yeah,
Yeah.
and taking decisions too much on the impulse. So it's a very thin line. You're absolutely right. But the energy is something that, as a young person, so you can be patient and yet energetic. And I think that is what you should try and balance out.
Okay. Patience with energy. Let me think about that. Because as you know, I'm 18 years old, so it's good advice for me. Okay. Dave, I think this would be for you. How do I go about getting funding for my startup? Yeah, and it is mentioned, Mr. Dave, please advise. How should a person go get funding for their startup? And I promise you, I haven't put this question.
Look, I think it's very, I think while there is a lot of funding available, I'd also like to caution all entrepreneurs who are listening that the bar for funding is actually going up because the market is also full of entrepreneurs with fabulous ideas. So you're competing a lot with uh, with the
The whole economy that is booming.
no, and
On
other startups and other people looking for funding, right? So the pie in terms of the amount of funding is now much larger than it was, but there are also zillions of people looking for that funding. I think
when could you define zillion? I mean, when you say zillion, I mean it's a very large number, and I'm sure you don't mean it. When I'm talking on a day-to-day basis, let's say your organization, how often do you get a project coming up for you?
when I started, when I pivoted from working with large businesses to smaller businesses, and my partner had made that pivot a few years before I did. And I remember asking him, I said, where will we get ideas and where will we meet these companies? And he said, you know what? The problem is not where will you meet the companies. The problem is how will you keep saying no?
Oh,
So, you know, Dominic, I think ultimately, I think you have to answer 4 large questions about your business, and the rest, I think, falls in place generally after that. There'll be a few others, but the first is that as a business, are you solving a large problem that no one else is solving, right? And that's a very important question because a lot of people get into business saying, "Iske liye bahut demand hai." That's a good reason for you to do business. It's not a good reason for a VC to fund you. A VC is looking for solutions to problems solutions to large
that don't exist.
Yeah, the problem exists, the solution doesn't, right? The second is that is there a very significant opportunity in terms of scale for this solution after that? So can you see a large market ahead? The third, and this is, very interesting, people say that, oh, today all companies can burn money indiscriminately. That's not true. Today companies on their P&Ls are making losses. The core economics of these businesses need to be extremely strong to get funded. When I say core economics, this is about the unit economics of what you sell versus the cost of, what that's going to cost you. And at that level, needs to have extremely high profitability. And most businesses that you see that are getting funded will actually cross this hurdle. And investors are trained to spot this, right? And the fourth is that you're able to establish that just as you found a better solution than existed, tomorrow competition is not going to find it that easy to do the same to you. So what we in our business call moats around your business, so the competition will find it hard to cross those moats. I think to whoever asked that question, if you answer these 4 questions very well, then I think investors are also, you could reach out. The investors are actually very open to, they're meant to find good ideas. So they will actually,
so going about funding the startup would mean that the person has to answer these 4, fill up these check boxes or tick these check boxes. One being, are you answering? Do you have a solution to a problem? And the solution is not to a large problem. It doesn't already exist. The solution does not exist. 2 is you would be able to scale up. 3 is your operational costs. Your operational costs must be very low vis-a-vis the profitability that you could see, or the selling point. And 4th is that you can scale up pretty fast.
Competitive advantages are
competitive. The moat you mentioned. Yeah. So no one else could enter this space.
Exactly.
Okay, so very interestingly, I don't know who this is, whether someone from my team also, but how much impact do you think the CoLaBoRate concept will make? Because it says how much impact, according to you, will this concept? So I presume they're meaning the CoLaBoRate concept.
So look, I haven't kind of really had that philosophical discussion of when you kind of flesh CoLaBoRate out to its ultimate form, what you're trying to. But if I think that if you are causing collaboration between, let's say, giggers and opportunities, I don't know if that's where you're trying to go.
Yes,
with, right.
That's what we're doing.
And I think that, look, there are
Existing players.
it's a problem to solve. Now, there are, of course, other platforms that solve this. I mean, someone like an Urban Clap, for example, is probably, a scaled up solution in this space. So the question that you will have to answer is, look, how would I be different from someone like them? Why could they not, like, let's say I get into a segment, why could someone like them with a lot of funding not kind of come into this segment and kind of own it as well? So I think if CoLaBoRate can answer these 4 questions, and I think you have a very good chance of doing it, definitely it's an idea that will get funding, right?
Purvi, I'd like to ask you, not from the funding perspective, but you see, because you deal with HR and companies, would companies open up to the idea of taking on freelancers if they have not already? And where is the space you think that freelancers could work? Where is the space you feel freelancers would never work? Personal opinion.
Okay, so a lot of companies have started actually. So, Dominic, you've hit upon the right idea. A lot of companies have started looking for freelancers and already on their way to looking for these people online, especially on digital platforms. So, CoLaBoRate as a platform, I think, especially for corporates, will work very well. However, there will be certain pockets that every corporate or every business will look at, and where they will have freelancers or gig workers, and that is those are places where things like confidentiality, for example, intellectual property, is not a big problem. So if it's R&D, let's say pharma, let's say IT, where intellectual property and confidentiality are extremely important, security is important, that is where companies would find it very hard to bring in freelance workers for a short period of time. So that's probably where it won't work. But places where it would work is where roles are not permanent. The job does not need a permanent resource, does not need a level of constancy, does needs a constant actually upgradation or differentiated skill set. So you can have one job with different people with different skills doing it. Those are the kind of jobs that companies will be happy to open up to. And sometimes when they're extremely unique skill sets, and you may not be able to find one person that you can employ, but those jobs are where again freelance workers would have many opportunities in the corporate world.
Thank you. Just one thought. See, when you mentioned about the confidentiality part and not being able to be outsourced or given to a gig, my thoughts went straight away to doctor, lawyer, accountant. So let's say, as an individual, I go to a doctor. I mean, technically, he's doing a gig with me because I've got a specific problem. I go to him for a solution, and naturally, I have to trust him with my data, right? My personal data. Then you go to a lawyer, same situation. You go to your accountant. I mean, especially in the Indian scenario, actually, even in the Western world, there are the sides that we tax avoidance, tax evasion. That line that you cross. So you'd need to anyway trust them, and they are gig workers. In fact, you then find it difficult to change from one doctor to another because now you got to start the whole process of building up rapport, or even a lawyer, or even an accountant. So that's just a small thing I'd like to add there. But Now, coming to another question, which is again related to you, Purvi. I want to switch jobs. Should I quit the current one and start looking for a new job, or should I continue to work while looking for a new job?
So, first of all, to whoever's asking this question, I hope you know why you want to do it. It's not a temporary frustration or fear that you have. But if you do have to look for a new job and you want to change your job, it's a good idea to try and find one. It's a tough environment right now. Don't quit before you have one, because it may take a little bit of time before you find the new job. And again, that may lead to a lot of frustration. You may not take up the right job for yourself, and you might just go from the frying pan to the fire. So my suggestion would be, wait till you find a job and then quit.
Okay. Interestingly, because we're three entrepreneurs here, we might want to wonder if it's someone from our team asking that question. Anyway, Purvi ma'am, skill or good attitude? What is more important for a person to be successful?
Both. There is no trade off, there is no imbalance. You need both. But yes, having said that, skills are easier to develop. A good attitude takes a lot longer to develop. So if you've got a good attitude and you've got a positive attitude, then focus on developing your skills and you've got your magical balance right there. But if you don't have a great attitude but you're highly skillful, chances are that survival in any environment, whether it's a job or as an entrepreneur, will be hard. So I'd say focus on your attitude, but don't forget the skill.
One thought
Okay.
would be I had, and I'd be keen to hear what you feel about this, but I think that, probably earlier in your career, skills are a lot more important because very often you are the last mile in the execution chain. I think later in your career, you probably have a team where there are a lot of skills, and attitude becomes very critical because often the team comes back to you when there are problems, you know. And while you do need skills to kind of give them some of those solutions, very often I think it's just keeping the um, attitude in the team going at that point in time.
So that would be leadership skills, right, Dave?
Well, yes, I agree. But, look, leadership skills, a lot of that does come with your own attitude, right? I mean,
True.
you can't be a great leader if you're not emotionally strong, if you're not positive, if you don't react to crises well. I mean, look, how many bosses actually panic and transfer that onto their teams? I mean, that's about the craziest thing as a boss you could be doing, right?
Okay. So now we've got a lot of questions and we're running out of time or run out of time. So I'm going to throw the question either to Purvi or Dave and your quick take on it. Okay. So this one is to Dave. What do you mean by purpose?
So I think, as I was saying, that look, just saying I'm getting into a business to make money is probably not a good reason to be in that business because you don't know how that's going to go. But if you say that there is a reason this business needs to exist,
Could you elaborate on the reason? Yeah, give your own example.
So I can give you our example, and for actually a while, I really struggled with why was I trying to do Lastaki? What was I trying to achieve with this? And people would ask me this question, and I didn't have a good answer to it till I had this epiphany where I said, I want to help 100 entrepreneurs make their first 100 crores. And I said, and 100 crores is not in valuation, but I want them to take 100 crores of cash home, and that became my goal.
So I'm applying to you to be one of your clients.
You'll have to work very hard, Dominic.
I'll work hard.
No, I'm just joking. I was just saying that, look, that clarified many things in my head then about why I was happy to be spending the next so many years of my life trying to achieve this. Uh,
Got you.
and my thing to my team was, I said, look, if we can help 100 people make 100 crores, we'll make money. Don't worry about it. We're not that stupid, right?
So this question I would normally throw to you, Dave, but I also know your answer. So I'm going to put it to Purvi. The person says, I want to make money. Should I start my own business? So in Dave's case, the question would be, don't start business to make money. It has to be a larger purpose. So that's why I'm putting it to you, Purvi. Do you have another answer? I want to make a lot of money. Should I start my own business?
I'm very used to contradicting things that Dave says, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to agree there. So I say that if you want to make money, sure, you could become an entrepreneur, but that can't be your only reason to become an entrepreneur. You need to have a very good business idea which will make you that money. You need to have the resilience to make sure you get to making that money. You need to have the right mentors, advisors to make sure you have the business model that will make you that money. And then, of course, you need to have the right team and the right people to help you make that money. So, if you really want to make money, make sure that you've got your ecosystem right before starting out your entrepreneurial gig, and then start it out. Don't just say, I want to make money, so I'm going to start a business. That equation doesn't work very well.
Okay. Got you there. Now coming to, because we got to move fast, like I said, so 3 must-read books, and it says question to all 3 panelists. So I'm being considered one more panelist, but actually we have 2 panelists. I'm just the moderator. So 3 must-read books according to you all.
I
So,
don't, sorry, Puri, go ahead.
no, go ahead, Dave.
No, I was actually going to say, I don't have 3 that I read a book a week, I think. And at different points, different books have, had huge impact on me. So I don't have 3 books.
Could you just give us a book that impacted you or made your life, changed your way of looking at it?
Look, personally, I've been very, very impacted by autobiographies, the journeys of people, journeys of sports people. Because I'm a big, big believer in the emotional strength required to kind of get to success.
So which are the 3 sports people you've read and were inspired by?
You can take any pick, but
Swimmer?
I would.
What's his name?
Yeah, I mean, Michael Phelps is a good.
Michael Phelps.
Example.
Yeah.
Absolutely, Michael Phelps is a good example.
Kobe Bryant.
I think Rahul Dravid had a lot to kind of, I had a lot to, and as everyone says, I'm a very deep thinking sports person.
Okay. So Rahul Dravid.
Recently I was reading Raheem Sterling's book, very topical given the match coming up today, and his memoirs. I think that is fantastic. I've been very inspired, by some books on ultra marathon running, because it's kind of taught me a lot about resilience, and breaking through barriers and challenges. So there's just been so many, Dominic, and
got it. Purvi, your 3 books, if you have 3.
So again, there are many books and there are so many things that inspire us. But I'm going to, since this is a particular kind of forum, I'll talk about a couple that I think are interesting and people here might want to read. One is one of my favorite authors, Warren Bennis, and he had a book on becoming a leader. It's called On Becoming a Leader. Very interesting book on leadership, whether you're working somewhere or you are an entrepreneur. So that's one. Another is a slightly oldish book also, 2002 publication on execution by Larry Bossidy and Ramcharan. Tells you a lot about whether you're working again or you're on your own or you're in an entrepreneurial setup, execution and the power of execution. I think that's a good one to look at. And one I read a couple of years ago, interesting book called Work Rules. It's insights from Google. teaches you a lot of interesting systems and processes. So if you're in the process of setting up your own business, how do you constantly innovate and set up process and systems at the same time, but without making it all too heavy, like we talked about multinationals sometimes, and making it all too bureaucratic. So that was an interesting book as well. So more relevant to this platform, these are the 2 3 books that I would suggest
What's
people.
interesting, Dominic, is that the HR person got inspired by books on systems and process, and the finance, the investment banker gets inspired by people stories.
Actually, it didn't strike me the other way around, but what you said did strike me the first time around. So I didn't realize that you were being inspired by people stories. Anyway, I'm going to put up 3 of the books that I this and come quickly to. So Dave, there's a very personal question, and I don't know where this is coming from. But Dave, sir, you don't seem happy with your job. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
I am thrilled with what I do. I think for the first time in my career, I mean, I actually tell people now I know I have something I can do for the rest of my work life. You know,
Oh, lovely. Ikigai. You hit your ikigai, what we call the spot.
yes,
Anyway,
absolutely.
the sweet spot.
Yeah.
Okay. Question to Dave. Why do you think there are so many startups? A quick answer, Dave.
Yeah, I think look, I mean, it's definitely easier today, and therefore we are seeing a lot of startups. I also think that startups get a lot more publicity now. There have always been people starting businesses and folding them up, and now you get written about when you start a business. So I don't know if that's changed that much, but I'm not a big fan of this whole thing of the process of the startup. I think business should get set up when there is a very good reason to set them up.
So the purpose, you always, I love the fact that you keep going back to the purpose. Purvi, should we build our own brands or help other people build a brand?
Why not do both? Um, while you're building somebody else's brand, you're also building your own brand. So you can do both. And when you are doing something for someone else, try to think of their brand as your own as well. Then it's not about him versus me, or her versus me, or them versus me. It's about all our collective brand. So
Win-win.
make it a win-win. By helping others, you're building your own brand in your own way, and I think a lot of us, especially the 3 of us here, have done that a lot. I think we've helped other companies, we've helped our clients, and in that process also built our own brand.
Great. Okay, another one to you. I'm just starting out. Should I work in a large company or small company? Big cog in a small wheel, small. I'm giving this to Purvi.
um, Try and find a good job that excites you. It doesn't matter what size of company. Just get a job that you enjoy doing, that you will be able to go to every morning and say, I want to do this. It doesn't matter what you start out at. If you start at a small company, you could get into a big company and vice versa. So don't make size your decision making point at this stage. Think about what it will do for your career, what the job will do for you, and what you can bring to the table to that job.
Great. Okay, so second last question. The last question is very interesting, so I'm going to keep it for last. Dave, this one's for you. If it's a large problem, because you said, one of the things of starting a business, it should be you're addressing a large problem. So I think it's coming from there. If it's a large problem, don't you think there would be a lot of big companies already trying to solve it?
So that's the interesting thing, right? And that's why actually a lot of large companies are collaborating and working with smaller companies extremely, you know, uh, consciously
Aggressively.
now, and aggressively and consciously. Uh, Look, a lot of problems, once someone has stated it and found a solution, think about Uber, for example, or I we have a client who's kind of working with a platform for trading recyclable plastic and e-waste in this country. And, if you think about that problem, for example, I mean, it's such a huge problem, but till somebody comes up with what you could do to solve it, and that's an idea. It's not necessarily the prerogative of large companies to think that way, because often large companies are not creative. And the advantage you have today is if you have the idea, the money is available for a small company to solve these problems. So if you look at a lot of small companies, they go from an idea to $1 billion of funding very, very rapidly, right? Because they're able to show that, look, this is a problem that needs a solution. I have the solution that to solve it. And, others will find it very hard to actually find a similar solution. If you can do that today, I mean, the environment's brilliant. You don't need to be in a large company.
Would you like to add to that, because you're smiling there when they were speaking?
No, I was smiling because of the last question, Dominic.
Oh, you can see the last question. So Dave, the last question to you.
So the
Dave,
last
who's
question
going
is
to
to
win?
Dave.
Yeah, Dave, who's going to win, England or Italy?
Well, I think England, and I've never been a fan of English football. This is the first English team that I'm actually, so I think England, though I have to confess, I have a little bit of, we have our own batch betting thing going on, and I have money on Italy there.
You have money on Italy to
Yes.
win.
And
You're
this was at the start of the tournament. So today, but right now I feel England will, and I think England should win.
Okay. Right. So you're betting on the dark horse. Anyway, so it's been 1 minute. There's one more question that's come up.
Well,
okay. So Sanjay Upadhyay has asked, would be very interested to know about the recycling plastic waste startup. But yes, I will call you. So Sanjay will call you probably. Right. So it's been a great conversation, Dev and Purvi. Thank you so much. It's the first time we've had a husband-wife on the panel. And interestingly, you all have both got, different, one is into funding and one is into HR. I'm in hospitality. The app is born into hospitality. And when Kaushan, CEO, who's a good friend of both of yours, she recommended you all. I was a bit skeptical, honestly speaking, because I said, how will I manage to, to have a conversation with these people, and that too as a panel? And she did it again. And then I said, okay, if she has that much faith that I can handle it, let me go ahead with it. It's been a great learning experience for me also. There were some things, like I described as the elephant in the room, which Purvi brought up, for example, is that there is a lot of money available for people to start businesses, which was a challenge at one time. You see, you've also mentioned about how when you have started your business, people your partner told you at that time that it's not about how you will get companies to fund, it's about how you will say no to the companies that are coming to you. And that's been, like, I would again describe it as the elephant in the room, that there's so much more possibilities today. And this has really been very encouraging and motivating, that not only are there possibilities, because like both of you realize that there are big problems which are not being solved by big companies. It's small companies that are solving them. The young entrepreneurs, the spirited ones, or the lateral thinkers, as we call them, who are able to come up with these solutions, and they can scale it up with the money available, which is all out there. So very, very good session with you all. Thank you so much. Thank you, audience, for listening in, and do stay tuned. We'll be back with another CoLaBoRate talk show, maybe about 2 weeks from now. God bless. Keep rocking.
Thank you.
Thanks, Purvi. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Dominic. And thank you, Kaushan.